You're listening to the best of the bravest. Interviews with the FDNY's elite. We've done 60 of these, 60, including tonight, which is crazy to think. You know, again, it's a mini series that, and it's a story that I've told before, but it bears repeating. Literally, I was talking with my brother, and I was saying, you know, and we still do a lot of this. I was doing so many NYPD interviews and only NYPD interviews. I'm like, one day it just dawned on me, light bulb going off over the head moment. Why am I not talking to firemen? I should be talking to both. And that was about 3 years ago now. And here we are, 60 volumes later of the best, the bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite. And this is a mini series that's become a true backbone of the show. And just when I think, I'm like, man, who else can I talk to? Guests like tonight's brought up, and it's a great thing to have them. You profile different aspects of the FDNY, the guys who run the line, the guys who were fire officers, the guys who were even chiefs and commissioners. You get the true ins and outs of what I think is the greatest job in the world and the greatest city in the world. So hello to Garrett Lindgren, an alumni of the best, the bravest. He was featured previously. Jake Ritzner, Pat Hetzel, good to see all of you here. And we'll get to a couple ads. It's been an interesting last couple of nights. You know, the Knicks and Rangers, if you follow me, are driving me nuts. You know, it's been a tug of war emotionally for me. It's a constant roller coaster. Knicks with a blowout victory yesterday, so they're one win away from the conference finals, which would be their first since the year 2000. And the Rangers are in the process of trying to do their best 2004 Yankees imitation, which hopefully they don't complete. So let's see if they're able to get a Game 6 victory and a trip to the conference final secured tomorrow. Gerard Glover's here, as is Gary Stadler, and it's good to see you guys as well. I don't want to keep my guests waiting too long, so we're going to go through our advertisements quickly. And the first one, of course, is my consulting company, MC Media Editing Services. Need advice on how to start your podcast? Frustrated with the editing process? Can't find a voiceover guy? Hi, I'm Mike Colón, and I'm here to help. I'm the owner and founder of MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company for all things media, where I can offer you consulting advice on how to get started, and once you get started, editing, as well as voiceover work, all for a very reasonable price. If you want to reach me, you can contact me at 917-781-6189 or the email that you see listed here. I'm always available, and I'm always willing to help. Again, 917-781-6189. Why go to some giant consulting firm that's going to charge you an arm and a leg when you can just come to me? If you want to be stress-free, the way to go is to call MC. MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company. Billy Ryan is a true friend of the show, and he'll have a big role in my book that's coming out soon. Good folks, Mad City Life on the Edge in the FDNY and NYPD. And if you didn't know, besides his 20 years, of course, as an NYPD officer and later detective, he has a PI business. So I hope you don't need a PI, because if you do, things aren't going well. But in the event that you do need one, he's the guy to go to. The Mike the New Haven podcast is proudly sponsored and supported by the Ryan Investigative Group. If you need an elite PI, look no further than the elite Ryan Investigative Group, which is run by retired NYPD detective Bill Ryan, a 20-year veteran of the department who served the majority of his career in the Detective Bureau, most notably in the Arson and Explosion Squad. So if you need a PI to handle anything from fraud, legal services, and anything else that you might require, contact Bill at 347-417-1610. Again, 347-417-1610. Reach him at his website or the email that you see here. Again, if you need a PI, look no further than Bill Ryan and the Ryan Investigative Group, a proud supporter and sponsor of the Mike to New Haven podcast. We're experimenting, I should say, with the 6 p.m. start time for the first time, since, as you guys know, that's this time slot we'll be moving to in June. It'll be Mondays and Fridays instead of Wednesdays and Fridays, hence the earlier start time today, and I do appreciate all of you being here. All right, now, well, naturally, as I mentioned in the promo for the show, and I had some fun with this, when New Yorkers hear the name Joe Bonano, the association is not necessarily a positive one. You're thinking about the mobster who died back in 2002, and no, we're not profiling that Joe Bonano, obviously. When you hear that name, you think of that particular individual, but that Joe Bonano was running around the streets of New York City causing all sorts of chaos and doing harm. Tonight's Joe Bonano, that's going to be on for volume 60 of the best, the bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite, was doing the opposite. He was doing good, running around into chaotic situations, yes, but doing good instead of bad in those situations. And why do I say that? Well, he's a 22-year retired veteran of the FDNY, came on in 1979 and left in 2001. And what's interesting about him is guys in New York City, on both the police department and fire department, wear many different hats. They work side jobs. His side job, and he's still active in it, is in the culinary field. He's an expert chef. He's even published a couple of books. And I'm glad I'm glad we were able to connect via Facebook, and it's another gold mine of resources I can use to get guests. And that guest, like I said, for tonight's volume 60, without further ado, is Mr. Joseph Bonanno. Mr. Bonanno, welcome. How are you?
Hey, thank you, Michael. Pleasure and an honor to be here. I to be called one of FDNY elites is pretty heady company, so I'm honored.
Oh yes, and it was a little bit of wordplay when I created the miniseries, and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, why not? The best or bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite rolls off the tongue easily, and like I've said, we've gotten so many unique characters across these 60 volumes, and I have no doubt profiling your career tonight will fit that bill. So before I get into anything involving your career, it was in your family's history. I believe your father was on the job, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know if that influenced your path off the rip, like it does some guys, or if it was something you came to the realization you wanted to do later. But nevertheless, take me through where you grew up and growing up with a firefighter in the house.
I actually grew up in the Bronx, and my father got on in 1957, and he was assigned to Engine 88 and Ladder 38 in the South Bronx. And yeah, I grew up in the Bronx, and about 1969 or so, uh, he decided he wanted to live the suburban life and sold his house in the Bronx and moved out to Lindenhurst, Long Island. And I just started high school. I wasn't very happy because I was a Bronx boy, and I loved the Bronx, everything about it, growing up there. Uh, I'm a city kid, and then next thing you know, you take me out to Lindenhurst, Long Island, suburbia. I remember saying to my friends, I don't even know what a Lindenhurst is. We knew the Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan. That's all you know. The subways, the L. That was my life. And then next thing you know, I'm out in suburbia in Lindenhurst. But it was his choice to move. He wanted bigger property, a little backyard for his kids to grow up. Uh, so for him, it was a up move. For us, it was like we missed the Bronx, but we fell into line with living on Long Island and stuff like that. So, and as far as his career goes, yeah, he worked in. I mean, they call the war years on the FDNY 1979 to 80 to 2001, but it really was the late 60s when the Bronx was really insane. All the areas in the city were just insane. Fires everywhere. I mean, I remember him coming home and he used to smell like a fireplace. I mean, he really smelled like smoke when he came home. It was unbelievable. It was in his hair. It was in his clothes. And, he really didn't talk about the fire department all that much and didn't like promote it towards me. Like, hey, when you turn 18 or you're going to take the test. He really didn't. And he really didn't talk about it all that much, maybe because he was so tired and so busy. And like you just said before, raising 4 kids, he had a second job. I mean, he was really just so busy. He rarely sat at the table and talked about the fire department and itself. So I didn't know all that much about it. But I do remember when I got out of high school and I went into the military. I was in the Air Force. When I got out of the Air Force, I went back home and the fire department test was coming up. And, what you just said before, what you alluded to before, some people want to exactly follow in the footsteps of their father. And then if you're an arrogant teenager like I was, you want to be the exact opposite. And I regretted to this day having an argument with him, saying to him, I don't want to be excuse the language, stupid fireman like you. I'm going to be a whatever CEO or invent the next computer. I really didn't. It's not that I thought it was a lowly job in any way. I just was one of those arrogant teenagers. And your father said yes, and you said no. He said up, you said down. So I remember him grabbing me once, and he goes, I don't care if you take the job or not, but you're taking the test. You don't have to follow my footsteps. And he didn't promote it. He didn't say it's a great job, the meals, the fun, the fires, the camaraderie. He didn't mention any of that. He just said, take the test. Don't be thick-headed. At least take it. He goes, if it comes up and you don't want to take it, that's a different story. But you're taking the test. Best advice he ever gave me. So I was in pretty good shape at the time. So I said, all right, you know what? I'll take the test. And I took the test. And, he wasn't the deciding factor. Actually, the deciding factor is we used to, they had like practice classes at the Jamaica Armory. And I still was on the fence about doing it. And I said, all right, I'm at least going to train for it. I went to Delahanty's, and any firefighter listening will know what Delahanty's is. It was a school to get you through the written test. And then they had practice physicals. And at the practice physical at the Jamaica Armory, I met two fellas, one named Joe Aquino, and another guy, Tom Pellegrino, who ended up going to Engine 290. Now, this fellow, Tom Pellegrino, who I'm still in touch with to this day, thank God he's still alive, he wanted to be a fireman since he was born, and a New York City fireman. So we would take, he was a little skinny guy, about 120 pounds, and they had the practice physical. I was in pretty good shape. I don't want to brag, but I was in really great shape. I was working out like crazy and strong and fit. And they had the dummy carry. You had to throw a 120-pound dummy over your shoulder, go up a flight of stairs, come down and put it down. So everybody that lined up had a lot of trouble trying to throw the dummy and carry it. And especially him, he was only 125 pounds. And he was right behind me on line for the practice. So the instructor blew the whistle. I, like nothing, threw the bag over my shoulder, up the stairs, down, and put it down. He was like, holy cow, I got to talk to you after this. And he talked to me. He says, how did you do that? And I said, well, I pull-ups, push-ups, and started coaching him a little bit. He goes, you got to help me because I can't do that event. He says, every other event I'm good at. That one I can't seem to get. So I was showing him a little bit of technique, how to lift it, helping him with working out a little bit. And, we had some time. And then he ended up getting on the fire department. So did I. And we ended up being in the same class together. But to this day, I distinctly remember the conversation. I said, Tom, I'm not long out of the Air Force. The fire department, the polished black shoes, uniforms, yes sir, no sir. I don't want to do that. He said, Joe, he goes, all my friends, I'm an Oceanside volunteer fireman. All my friends are firefighters. It's not like that. The training academy, yes. After that, you get out. The way he said it, he goes, Joe, it's like a big frat house. And I couldn't conceive of that, because previously I was in the military. You never talk back to an officer. You never come in late. You, yes sir, no sir, with everything. Plus every other job I had, I was fairly responsible. You can't show up late. You can't, that's not saying you can show up late in the fire department, but the rules are there, but they're very lax in the fire department. As long as you do your job when it comes to going to fires and knowing your job. But pretty much everything else was the uniforms were and he said, I couldn't conceive of that, but he convinced me. So what wound up happening is we both took the test and we wound up being 24 numbers apart on the list. So I said, we're going to be in the same class. And he says, are you going to take it? And I said, Tom, we're going to, yeah, if you're going to be in my class, you have a friend in the class and I'll see what it's like. And so I took the appointment in May of '79. We were in the class together. I immediately made, and one of the convincing factors was when I was down at the training at the Jamaica Armory. Again, I wasn't meeting older men like my father and his friends. I was meeting a lot of guys my age. And, once I got to talking to them, how could you even think of not taking this job? What are you going to go out and work in the corporate world? And, the corporate world's a bunch of nonsense. You work for 7 years, they lay you off, you go to another place. It's a lot of yes or no. If you don't like yes or no, sir, the corporate world is totally like that. So I don't know. I was just kind of weighing it out. And then we wound up being in the class. And once I started, I said, wow. And again, I wasn't in a firehouse yet, but the training academy was familiar to me because I was in the military. And then I was looking for the day when we get out of there, what a firehouse would actually be like, which was inconceivable to me. My father, when I got home, my father didn't say, hey, Joe, I had no idea they had these meals. And we'll talk about that later, which led to the book. I don't ever remember him mentioning, man, this other guy made chicken cutlet parmesan the other night, London broil, and he never mentioned that. I guess he was in the firehouse in Engine 88, which is super busy.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Report from Engine 82 was right down the block from Engine Company 88.
That's your classic Bronx engine right there.
Yeah, and he worked with Dennis Smith, and but again, I guess it was so busy or horrendous that he didn't want to take it home with him. So he really never talked about it, and he was just doing never. I don't remember the meals, him ever mentioning the meals. I did meet a lot of his friends, and the one thing I did note was a lot of his friends were just a complete crazy panic type guys that you like every one of them was like your favorite uncle. They were big and strong and handsome and funny and engaging with kids, and I just so it seems like a great group of people, which wound up happening when I got on the job. The firefighters I worked with were exactly the same. So went through the academy, graduated the academy. First assignment was, and I was disappointed because when you're young and at a probate school, you want to go to a busy firehouse. And I was assigned to Engine 319. And nothing against them. It was just slower firehouse where a lot of firefighters go if they've had the career in the busy companies. But I first night there, you know, it was, you know, to relate to some of the people that are listening that may not be firefighters, like, you know, to me, I guess from my father smelling like smoke, I would thought my first night tour at 6 and you get off at 9 the next morning. I mean, I thought like when you show up at 6 and I thought you punch a clock like in a job, and I didn't know somebody signed you into a house watch journal. And then, you know, you're brand new and you like don't know what to expect. And they're like, "Hey kid, you in on a meal tonight?" I go, "Meal? Yeah." But I had brought something with me because I didn't know that there was a meal. And Engine 319, I guess because they had a little bit more downtime, had some of the best cooks in the fire department. And I mean, I sat down to have this dinner that was restaurant quality dinner. And they're like, "Yeah, $3." And there's ice cream. I'm like, $3 for a piece of chicken cutlet the size of a gas pedal, gooey with cheese, unlimited garlic bread, and a half a gallon ice cream. And I'm like, wow, I had no idea this was like this.
So this is a steal.
And I go, "And they're paying me?" And then, you know, the like, if you don't know the nature of I thought, I said, you show up at 6 o'clock and I'm just going to be going from one fire to another, to another, to another. And then you get off at 9 o'clock and you're exhausted. I had no idea that there were places that were quieter and slower. Yeah, they had their share of fire duty here and there, and neighbor car fires and things like that. But it was generally considered a slow company. But and I think you, in your pre-interview, you alluded to Engine 332.
Yes.
And that was my wake up to busy companies, because some of the companies were so slow and some of them were so busy that the firemen in the busy companies were getting beat up. So every third night they would what they called interchange. So Engine 319 interchanged with Engine 332 in East New York, which is right down the road from 290 where my friend got assigned. And that was exactly what I thought my father was doing, and it was what he was doing. The minute we got there, like, our tour duty was 6 to 9, 6 o'clock, Engine 332 would radio, "We're on the way to 319. Okay, we're leaving." We'd pass them on the Interborough Parkway, and then the minute we backed in and were in service, Engine 332 responded 1075, vacant building on, you know, Livonia and whatever. And out we went. And then I'm like, well, this is a fireman. you knock that one down, you clean. I'm like, wow. And then put us back in service. Engine 332, my Lieutenant Osterman, back in service. The minute we were back in service, Engine 332 respond to a call fire on. I was like, holy mackerel. And the way I could explain it, and especially because I came on in the summer, and the summer in busy areas were even busy.
That's the key.
Even busy. I'm telling you, the whole of East New York smelled like smoke. And the best way I could describe it, because years later, the movie Apocalypse Now.
Yep.
The scene where Martin Sheen is on that boat going to find Colonel Kurtz, and there's all smoke and flares, and, you know, there's all the natives are on the shoreline, and he looks like I'm in another world. That's exactly what it felt like, riding through the streets of East New York at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, oh my God. You know, and it was funny because the older guys didn't want to interchange because, you know, they wanted the slow night and the chicken cutlet parmesan and maybe a night's sleep. So I would have no trouble. They'd say, "Joe, you want to work, you know, Thursday night for me? You'll get to go to Brooklyn." I said, "Sure." And then he'd pay me back on a night when they didn't have to interchange. But just like a wake up call to what busy versus a slower company. And again, this is no disrespect to firefighters. They earn their stay in those slower companies. And yes, there's just as much risk. I mean, the frequency isn't as much, but there's just as much risk. And I don't want to in any way disrespect firefighters who have had their time and went to a slower company. I mean, that's just where you decide. And some of them didn't do it for that reason. Some of them, it was a commuting thing.
Right.
You know, maybe they worked in the. My father actually transferred to Engine 306 in Bayside because we moved to Long Island, and then he had to commute to the Bronx every day, and then he was getting beat up as far as it being busy, and then he had to pay a toll and the gas and, you know, everything else. So, you know, he decided to the latter part of his career to spend in Engine 306. It's another great company. And you know, those all companies, you learn so much from those firefighters because they had their time in and they had the experience. It's just that we're not doing it as often as in a busy company.
Mm-hmm. And that's where, and we're talking with Joe Bonano for volume 60 of the best, the bravest interviews with the FDNY. So for those of you that want to contribute in the super chats available, please do so if you want to. That's where it's important to remember the experience, because I remember Kevin Kubler over from Getting Salty, who I work with and for, mentioning that when he got to Squad 288 in 1998, he looks over at Chief Jack Fanning, the late great Jack Fanning, who was killed on 9/11, sadly, and thought, come on, Hazmat, what's he? And turns out, look at the companies Chief Fanning had worked at prior to Hazmat. He was the real deal. And as a result, you pick up so much knowledge. Just because these guys are on the back nine of the career doesn't mean they started on the back nine and stayed there their whole career. As you said, and I like how you put that, they earned their keep. They were in those busy companies. They went through the war years. They went to their fair share of holy crap boxes, to where if you don't, not you specifically, but in general, if you don't sit down when appropriate and ask those questions about those boxes and try to learn and try to pick up tidbits, you are nuts. You're out of your mind. You're not really tuned into the job.
Yes. And again, you know, there's other reasons people decide to work. And, you know, and again, I don't want to in any way, shape, or form disrespect anybody that is a firefighter. I don't care if you're from Auburn, Indiana, or Dayton, Ohio, or the South Bronx in the 70s. It comes with its risk. It comes with it. So people might have a personal decision. I mean, maybe, like I said, maybe he needed to work in that place because he lived locally, wanted to work in his own neighborhood, and had nothing to do with him being afraid. You know, I've never met a fireman that was afraid, whether it was in a slow company or a busy company. Just he might have had personal reasons for deciding to work in a outer borough company. Maybe he just grew up in that neighborhood. And that's where he said, you got a sign there from Proby School. And he says, well, you know, I live right here. I can walk to work. Why do I need to transfer to? I mean, I had heard that early on. Hey, kid, you got to transfer out of here to go to a busy company to learn the job, you know? And I guess there's a little bit to that. And you're right. When you're young, you want to go action and see action, which is why I transferred, you know?
And that's the main thing, because that area, before I get to your time in 129 truck, that area, you mentioned 290. 290's housed with 103. 103 is doing a lot of work in its own right. 103 at one point had 2 sections to it because of the volume of calls that they were going to back in the day, which is important to note. And then you mentioned 332, which is over on Liberty Avenue. It used to be elsewhere, but they moved it to Liberty in the 60s. Brooklyn was, and this is no knock on the other boroughs because you were just as busy in 129 and Flushing, as we'll touch on. But Brooklyn was, guys call it the borough of fire, talking about the largest borough of the 5, as I've said before. So naturally, even though it does have its quiet spots, most of the borough is dealing with a crap ton of work to go around, to where if you want to cut your teeth, it seemed back then, and not to say Queens didn't, not to say Manhattan didn't, or not to say Staten Island didn't, but if you really wanted to cut your teeth back then as a firefighter in New York City in the 70s and 80s, there were 2 places to work, at least from my vantage point, Brooklyn and the Bronx.
Yes. Yeah, Harlem lost its, maybe that was in the early 60s. It was busy, but, you know, Harlem started to gentrify and get nicer, and it wasn't as busy as the Bronx. Like you said, the South Bronx was pretty heavy duty fire duty.
It was a war zone.
Yeah, and so was Bushwick and East New York. And again, I remember that because I told you, riding through the streets, I thought it was Martin Sheen and Platoon. It's like, oh my, what is going on here?
Yeah, I mean, for a guy, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was living in Lindenhurst, Long Island, so I came from suburbia to that. I was like, oh my God, wow, what a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. I mean, listen, for a guy in his 20s at the time coming onto the job, even though you'd been a Bronx boy, like you said, you'd spent so much time out in Long Island, it's an eye-opener. It's definitely an education without anybody even having to tell you anything. Now, out of all the places you worked, 129 truck was the place you were in the longest. Now, you mentioned it's kind of fitting. Your dad was in Queens, even though he was in an engine company. You're in Queens now in Flushing, so I got a picture here that you sent of 129. That's the old rig back in the day.
Yeah.
I mentioned it's in Flushing, but for those not familiar geographically with the area, where is 129 first due
to? Shea Stadium.
Oh, okay, right there.
And LaGuardia Airport.
Oh, yeah, pretty quiet place, right? Nothing could have been going on there.
Not, you know, it's funny because you would get in these machismo arguments with firefighters, like, you know, I'm in the Bronx, I'm in East New York, but actually 129 for about a 6 or 7 year period had the highest amount of occupied structural work. it's different vacant buildings, and you could say what you want. A lot of East New York and the South Bronx are vacant building fires, and sometimes it was fought outside, sometimes they went in. But for occupied structural work, 129 was the busiest in Queens, and in almost in the whole city for actual occupied dwellings that were on fire with actually people not vacant. And again, that's no hurrah for one thing. It's just what this. So if somebody would say, "Hey, Joe, I'm in the South Bronx, and you're just in Queens," and I'll be like, "Yeah, well, you're going to vacant building fires. I'm going to occupied structural work, which is more important, saving lives, saving people's homes, not some vacant building in the middle of the night that you're just spraying water on." So just a machismo back and forth thing. So that's how I used to back up 129 as being a pretty great company to work in. Down the block from 138, which was also very busy. For occupied. But a few years in a row, we actually beat them in occupied structural work, not in runs. They had more runs, but a run isn't anything. A run is a false alarm.
Right. An actual legit box. And that's the thing I was going to ask you about, because they had the squatter problem back then in certain boroughs. But and this is 82 when you got there, so the city's still going through this. You had a lot of arson for profit scenarios, not just in those two boroughs that I mentioned, but throughout the city, where families would know they would move higher up on the list to get a new apartment, so they burn out their own apartment.
Yeah.
Was that what was going on back then in 129 that made you guys so busy, or was it the makeup of the buildings? What type of buildings were you dealing with in 129 area?
Everything. H-type, high rise, private dwellings. It was such a mix of an area. And really what was going on, it wasn't the arson fires for profit. What started happening, it started to become so expensive to live there that what they started to do is they would take like a 2-bedroom apartment and turn it into like little suites, and have like in a 2-bedroom apartment, they'd have like 18 people living in there. And then they would just frame out a room that was basically the size of a jail cell, maybe 3 foot by 8 foot. So there'd be 18 people. You'd knock the door down and you crawl in, and there's like, what are all these doors doing in here? And they would like a 10 by a normal bedroom, let's say, is 12 by 15. That bedroom would be divided into 5, and there'd be 5 people living in there. But not just that there's 5 beds in a 12 by 18 room. They actually framed out dividers, sheetrocked it, and had a door on it. So you'd have 4 or 5 people enclosed in a 12 by 18 bedroom. So that was the reason. So now, of course, if you have multiple people in there who smoke and who left a cigarette, who cook, you have 18 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, there's absolutely going to be more incidences of fire.
Yeah, makes sense naturally.
Yep.
And that's the danger. You don't see it until you're in it. You can have a general size up from the outside, but that's an incident commander's worst nightmare, because then you get in and it's like, oh, and that's, I was thinking about, because I just had Chief Joe Bonano on. That was kind of the Black Sunday situation. They didn't know there were illegal partitions and illegal walls there until they were in the building, which dramatically changed operations. So that's, for not only for an IC, but for a guy like yourself that's going in there, and truckies are ventilating, truckies are taking down the roof, all the overhauling operations that you can think of. Those are the factors that when you see it, man, it has to really send a chill down your spine, given the danger associated.
Yeah, well, you're on the floor and you're crawling in for a search. You find the first bedroom. You push the door open in the first bedroom, and you run into a wall. And it's not just a wall. You start going to the left, and you say, "Wait, there's a doorway here." 3 feet later, there's another doorway. 3 feet later, there's another doorway. Like, what is this? And then again, they would put the person, whoever it was that was living in that, I don't think it was quite 3 foot. It might have been 4 foot by 7 foot. But that person had a TV, a hot plate, and put a hot plate in. Plus, they're overwiring the building. If there's 5 rooms in a small room and each one of them has a hot plate, the drawer on the electric, that's the reason there was so many fires in Queens at that time.
Yeah,
5 people with hot plates.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all it takes sometimes, and that's the scary part and the sad part. But it was the condition of the city back then. I did want to ask you this, because you were a truckie for the majority of your career, the 22 years, but
Yes,
that
sir.
first transition from having been an engine guy in Brooklyn to having been a truckie, how long did it take you to get used to truck ops?
Well, I was pretty handy as far as house renovations and stuff like that. So I had that kind of knowledge in my bank. So I had like I said, I had a fair amount of construction knowledge. which really helped a lot, because you know how doors are hung and how you can almost tell by looking at a doorway whether it's framed out or whether it's metal or whether the hinges are in or out. So a lot of that construction stuff really helped. And then, as far as phasing from engine company operations to ladder company operations, because even when you're in an engine company, you'd work overtime in a ladder company. And if I remember correctly at the time, I was detailed to ladder 138 for a month while I was in engine 319, because they don't want you to just have engine experience. So I went to 138 for a month, picked up a lot of, so I was not completely unfamiliar with ladder company operations. Yes, now you're there full time. And, like I said, I believe the construction knowledge really helped me a lot. But I had a little bit of experience, not a lot. In a month's time at 138, you're not going to be a seasoned truckie, but you pick it up as you go along, and then, be humble and take the advice of firefighters you work with. And there was, like I said, 129 was a little bit of a mix of older and younger guys, and the older guys were really experienced, excellent firefighters. And you follow their lead, and they're not giving you the roof. They're not giving you the outside vent right away. You're getting the can or the irons, and you're going to stick with the officer on the inside right away. And then once in a while, you'll get, you watch and you learn. You see and you ask questions and drill, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, it comes with the territory because, naturally they don't throw you into the deep end of the pool right away. They want to test you out and see how you do in the first place, because it's different to go through the training at the Rock. And the Rock is great. A lot of great training goes on down there, both then and now. But it's completely, and this is anywhere, not just New York City, as you know, completely different thing when you're actually in the box and how you operate, under the box. Lieutenant's watching, captain's watching, so is a senior man.
Everybody's watching. It's so intimidating. Not actually, I'll go as far as say, not actually your performance on the job, just everything. The kind of car you drive up in, how you act around the firehouse. They're really like, we don't want to be people who judge people, but you can't help you. People come in and right away they're picking up cues on what you do and what you say, and you got to really keep your mouth shut and just absorb and not, mouth off right away, because they'll put you down and put you in your place immediately.
Yeah, no, of course, and it's funny. I go back to something. I'm on the civilian side now in the fire service where I work. I handle social media for my current department over in Connecticut, and we recently hired 8 new firefighters, 6 men, 2 women, and they're all doing a great job thus far. But one of the things that the captain who heads our training division mentioned to them was, whatever preconceived notions people have of you, rather rightly or wrongly, and I'm paraphrasing, that's what they have of you. It doesn't have to be that you've said anything or done anything wrong. It's just how you walk into the fire. Exactly what you just said, how you carry yourself around here. If they've seen you at other jobs, or maybe you were working in ambulance service prior, they have those notions of you and impressions of you, good or bad. So it's up to you to either, if they're good ones, hold them up, or if they're bad ones, dispel them. So it's key early on. And I think a lot of rookies understand that, because that first year, really those first 2 years, doesn't matter where you are, going from into a new firehouse or into a new company, it can be rough. It can be rough. But if you hold your own, transition becomes easier with time.
Yeah, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression.
Oh, yeah. That's
But,
true.
and the other thing is, you got to quench your personality a little bit, because I work with firefighters who were outrageously funny, but you don't walk in cracking jokes right away. You just, and yeah, then you have to, like, warming up an audience if you're going to perform. When they come in, if the guy's out, I would say that, listen, if you're outrageously funny, like almost like a Jim Carrey type of guy, demonstrably funny, you can't walk in and do that right away. They're just like, what is this guy, a clown? It's your job. So you eat whatever it is about your personality, kind of ease it in a little bit, hold it back in the beginning, and just observe, absorb. And then it's fine to let your personality come. I love firefighters that are nutty and funny and whatever, but not right away. And especially if you're a bully or a big mouth, forget it. You really got to shut that down.
It's not going to go well for you in the long run.
No.
Not the slightest. From an operational standpoint, 129, the same question applies to 152, which we'll get to later. But like I said, a dozen years in 129. What's a job, and you don't have to pick one, it could be multiple, because I'm sure they all stand out for different reasons, where you went to a box and from a truck operation standpoint, you said to yourself afterwards, damn, that was a good job?
It's funny you say that because I just listened to a guy the other night using that expression, "good job," um, which as a firefighter, good means somebody's house is on fire or some building is on fire, or which you don't ever want to see that kind of a tragedy for anybody, especially if it involves loss of life. But even if it doesn't involve loss of life, it involves loss of property. So for a civilian to hear the word, they went to a good fire, what does that mean? What that means, like you just said, from an operational standpoint, everything went smoothly. There was nothing on the street blocking the area ladder from getting to the roof. There was nothing stopping the firefighters from breaking the door in and searching. Did a good search. Nobody died. Everybody went home. The person's house was spared major damage. So when you say operation, so you're trying to ask me if I had one in particular
Mhm.
that I remember? Yeah, there was one that was right down the block from the fires that was completely out of control. And it was so funny. We would take the rig out for the meal, but we sent this firefighter out because the food store was right around the block. And we said, take a radio with you. Here's the meal. Go get the meal. We'll be back here. And once in a while he did that. So he walked and he was walking back and over his left shoulder, the whole top floor, I'm talking about 10 apartments in a row, flames blowing out the window. And we had already gotten the alarm for it. And we responded. We came around the block. As soon as we turned the corner, I saw it. And he's like Lottie Da with the bags in his hand. Not even, I said, Brian, look to your left. I yelled out the window as we pulled up. And he's like, oh my God. I go, how did you not see that and hear these people? And that particular job, I can tell you stories till the cows come home. And that particular job was really a funny one because at that job, we had the time. Of course, I was in the truck company. I was on the irons, going to the top floor. We were taking door after door after door, searching the apartments. And by the time I got to the third or fourth door, I mean, I was beat up, just about out of oxygen, and the rescue had arrived at that time, and they were doing their search up there too. So my friend, he had the Halligan in the doorway on the third or fourth door, and I'm like, ba boom, ba boom, ba boom, heavy metal doors. Finally, so this one was really having a hard time with it, and I was kind of shot too, just about out of air. And my friend's on his knees, and it's smoky. You could still see enough to hit the end of the Halligan, but for some reason, a rescue guy came up, tapped him on the shoulder. I guess he was out of air. He went down into the hallway, and the rescue guy on his knee took the Halligan. But when he took it, he put his head away a little bit, and he moved the Halligan. And now his head was right where I was hitting. And it was about the fifth shot, and I was like getting annoyed. I go, hey, this one's going to go. This shot, I'm going to take it out. And I mean, I hauled back like Mickey Mantle, and I took a swing, and this poor rescue guy, I hit him in the head, cracked his helmet. But me, the rescue guy, and the door all fell into the apartment. And the funny part of it's not a funny story, but the funny part of the story wound up being one of my friends in 129 had just got engaged to a girl. It was the girl's father. And he was He was on vacation in Florida, and his girlfriend called him up, and he says, "Dude, you're not going to believe it. A guy from your company hit my father in the head with an axe." And he goes, "Who was it?" "Oh, it was Joe Bonano." And he goes, "Oh my God, are you kidding?" And it wound up, of all the firemen to be holding the Halligan, it wound up being this guy's wife's future wife's girlfriend. I mean, father in rescue. And I actually saw him at a wedding. When my friend finally got married, I was embarrassed. The guy, "Stop! I can't go to the wedding. He's going to be there in a sling for his head." And he actually came up to me and he said, "Listen, because of you, I wound up getting a disability pension." And
Oh,
I was afraid to run into you, And he goes, "I knew it was." He said, "I didn't know it was you, but I found out later." Anyway, a little long story. I diverted a little bit there. So
no, that's fine. It's a great story. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I
Hey,
don't
at
know.
least he got to the apartment.
Yeah, got to me, and he wasn't severely injured, so thank God.
Yeah. Thank
But
goodness for the helmet.
but that particular job I remember. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Swing and a miss. He struck him out.
strike him out.
Oh boy. Well, like I said, all's well that ends well. And at least he was able to get that pension. And as far as the area, I mean, you mentioned LaGuardia, you mentioned Shea. Even in the years where the Mets may have not been too good, it's still a great place to be. And you were there during 1986, actually, when they won the World
Yes.
Series. So tell me about. I mean, I don't know how much involvement you had with the stadium itself, with details or whatnot, but just being in that area, especially during October, for that Met run, what was that like?
Well, one of the greatest things that happened to me is I was detailed the night that the Mets won the World Series, the final game,
Mhm.
because they have fireworks in the parking lot. There has to be an engine company there, and I wasn't looking for it. I just happened to be detailed to the engine that night, and then they said, "Joe, we're detailed to the Mets game," and we were in the parking lot when they won the World Series, and all people are outside, fireworks, Yahoo all over the place. Yeah, it was great. It was great. But yeah, we would go there every once in a while. We had to inspect it. We inspected Shea Stadium. That was on our inspection detail. And yeah, one of my friends actually, I'll never forget. He went in when George Steinbrenner was there. I guess he thought that we're the fire department and we could do whatever we want. He was walking around, and he just wandered into Steinbrenner's office. And he's in his uniform. And George Steinbrenner, he was a bit of a character, George Steinbrenner, I think. And he said, "What are you guys doing here?" He goes, "I'm inspecting." He goes, "You're not allowed to walk in my office. Get the blank out of here." He didn't care if he was a fireman or not. He just, "Get the blank out of here." Oh, all right. So yeah, that was my foray into Chase. And I worked in Forest Hills for a little while too. We used to do the tennis matches over there.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
U.S. Open.
U.S. Open. Yeah, we were there a few times. Yep.
Every summer. Well, since you mentioned Steinbrenner, before I get back to your career, I told the story before, but again, it's another one that is definitely worth repeating. And we're talking with Joe Bonano here in the Mike the New Haven podcast, volume 60 of the best, the bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite. So 2000 World Series, Yankees were playing the Mets. This is right after game 3. Mets had won game 3, so they're still down in the series, but it's a series now. It's 2-1 in favor of the Yankees. A pipe burst in the Yankee clubhouse. So, Steinbrenner walks around. I guess the Met repair guys had gone in there, fixed it up as best they could. And he looks around and says, "Nope. No. You are not going to sit on this furniture." As furniture imported from Yankee Stadium in the Bronx, brought into the visiting clubhouse at Shea Stadium so that Yankee players could be comfortable. And that's the kind of maniacal owner that Steinbrenner was. But it worked because he won, and he won a lot. So,
Yep.
quite the
Yep.
character indeed, and he is missed.
Yep.
He certainly is missed. So 1994 comes around. This is an interesting point in your career, and it flies by so quickly because it's 15 years. You blink, it feels like you just got on the job yesterday, and you're still down at 319 engine. Now you got 15 years. You're halfway. You're just about there to a pension. You're 3/4 of the way there if you want to leave in 5 years. You didn't, but you move. You stay in the borough, but you go from 129 truck down to 152, and that's where you would stay until the end of your career, 94 to 01. So same style company, still a truck company. Why the move though? Commute reason? Did an opportunity open up?
No, and we'll get into the whole cookbook thing. But the cookbook thing was just about to be published, and I didn't want to be in the firehouse. I didn't want to be in the same firehouse that I was in. I wanted to be in someplace brand new when the book finally came out, because I kind of knew that it was going to be Regis, Good Morning America, Today Show. And, I had my run in that company, and I don't want to use the word jealousy, but, a lot of the chop busting over the book, and you can't cook, and how did you get a book published? And so that part of it was starting to get a little old. So I figured, when the book actually first came out, which was 94, 95, it was 95, I wanted to be in a brand new place because there would be a little bit of a grace period in a new firehouse where they're kind of feeling you out, and they're not so quick to jump all over you and stuff like that. So that was my primary reason. I wanted to be in a brand new place. And I actually have another story about that tragedy. I don't know. I just seem to be always around I had worked a detail in fire prevention in Manhattan, and the headquarters for fire prevention was Ladder 5. And I worked with Captain John Drennan, because we would have the inspection headquarters was upstairs. We would do our inspection, but when I had overtime, it would be in Ladder 5. So I worked about 6 or 7 tours in Ladder 5, and it was starting to be near 94, 95 when I didn't want to go back to 129. I asked Captain Drennan, and he said, "Sure, Joe. I called your company. Your captain you came highly recommended from your captain. You want to transfer here? I don't have a problem with it." So I put the paper in for Ladder 5, and before the transfer came out, I had to go back to. I had inspection detail ended. I went back to 129, awaiting transfer to Ladder 5, which is going to happen any week. Captain Drennan called me up and said, "Joe, listen, I got this guy Chris Seidenberg. I'm sure you're familiar with the name.
Yeah.
He's coming out of Pro B school, and I taught Little League with him. And if you take the spot, he's not going to get it. So would you do me a favor? You came highly recommended. I definitely want you to work here. I've worked with you several times. I want you to come here, but can you do me a favor? Pull the transfer, put it in a month or two, and I'll make sure that you get here. And in that period of time, there was the fire on Watt Street, and Captain Drennan and Chris Seidenberg and James Young all passed away.
Yeah.
So
My goodness, I'm sorry.
Yep. And then I ended up here, of course I heard about it. I was kind of devastated at thinking I could have if my transfer went through, I would have been in Chris Seidenberg's place. So anyway, I went back to 129, and then I said, you know what, I'm not going to let a fives out, especially after what happened. And then I just said, I put like four different companies in, and just 152 was the one that came up. And more of it was because I didn't want to be in the same fives when the book hit, because I'd have this grace period where guys would kind of lay off a little bit. Eventually they didn't, but that's okay. That's
at
just
least
part
you
of
had,
it.
like you said, you had the grace period, which was key.
Yeah.
And you got certified, I believe, in that. Well, you knew how to cook before, but you had gotten certified in the nutrition field in 1993. So, like I was mentioning, and we can get into it now because it segues perfectly. Firemen do have, and cops too, do have their side jobs and side interests. And it's amazing because you look at some of these guys and gals, and if not for the fact, not that it's holding them back or anything, that's not what I'm saying, but if not for the fact that they were on the fire department or police department, they could be, celebrity chefs or actors or stand-up comics. Some of them are lawyers, doctors. It's amazing the talent level that exists just, from a skill set and knowledge level alone, and how they apply it. And your way of applying it was through both nutrition and through the culinary side. And besides firefighting, that's obviously your other passion. So tell me about, we'll trace it back, and then we'll talk about publishing that first book in the mid 90s, where the love of cooking began and where the idea of wanting to put a book together began as well.
Okay, well, again, I'll be the first one to admit, and if anybody from 129 is listening, they'll completely back it up. I was just an average, once in a while firehouse cook, but I did love it. And I did love the whole sit down 12 firefighters together meal period. It was so endearing to me, that part of it, which you don't really see in pretty much any other job. My father really never told me about it. And it was one of the things I really came to love. I was single, and I remember watching The Galloping Gourmet growing up. And I used to see how the women used to swoon over him when he would bring out the food. So I always kept that in my mind too. Like, if I ever date somebody, be nice to know how to cook and take him out to dinner is one thing, but make him a really nice meal. And even for friends and family, because somebody passed away, what's the first thing they do? They bring over a thing of lasagna, they bring over food, the comfort factor of it. So I kind of liked it, but again, being new to the fire department and just an average, I backed off. I'm like, I'm not going to jump in and get berated by the food. And some of the firefighters are great cooks. So, but what I saw happening, and more of my expertise and background was in fitness and nutrition. And I didn't want to end up, and again, no disrespect, but some of them let themselves go at the 20-year mark or the 15-year mark, overweight. It's a physical job. It's dangerous on one end, but it's also physically dangerous. I didn't want to get killed from injuries sustained at the kitchen table. That's the way I used to put it. So I said, you know what? I got to jump in here once in a while and cook and make stuff that's healthier. So that's what started happening. I started saying, and I always use the story, a firefighter was making mashed potatoes for 8 of us, and he's peeling sticks of butter like bananas, and he's throwing them in there. Granted, it tastes great, but you got 4 sticks of butter for 8 people. That's, after 15, 20 years, that could add up to cholesterol, heart attack, any of the above, ill health, unfit, whatever you want to call it. And again, I don't want to disrespect any firefighters. Firefighters are in fantastic shape. I just didn't want to end up like that. And I said, I got to jump in here and start cooking. So that's what I did. I started little by little, experimenting, some great, some not so great. But eventually, as fitness became more in vogue, which it did as the 80s and 90s, and got more and more like that, Arnold Schwarzenegger, thank him, he brought fitness and bodybuilding to the general public in a big way. And it became very popular. So, and then, it's part of being your job, it's a physical job. So again, they warmed up to it, not too bad, So and I started like at home experimenting with some recipes that were healthier. The machismo thinking always was like, hey kid, You know, you can get killed in a fire next week. I ain't gonna worry about having too much cheesecake or ice cream. You know, yeah, but if you don't get killed, you know, then what? Then you're gonna retire with a pension with a heart attack and,
Exactly.
and be debilitated. You know, and the best expression, one of my lieutenants said, it, you know, if I knew I was going to live this, you know, there's that side of it. But the other side of it, I remember old lieutenant saying to me, he goes, if I knew I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. Because now you're older and you're carrying around this broken down body with a possible stroke or a heart attack or other issues. So just live as, I don't think it's going to make you live any longer than anybody else. You just have a better quality of life. And for job performance in particular, you know, and again, I'm not going to pick on any firefighters in particular, but I've certainly been to fires where I was on the fourth or fifth floor landing and I passed a firefighter on the landing with his mask off, couldn't breathe just from running up 5 flights of stairs. Never made it to the fire floor because he couldn't. He was out of breath.
Right.
You know? And again, no disrespect, but and I
No,
would
it's
never go back.
reality.
Yeah, and I would never go back and say anything. I never did it that way. I was never a type to promote it. It works more by attraction because he saw you pass him. And when he got back to the firehouse, maybe again they don't want to do it in front of other firefighters. But hey, Joe, listen, I got to do something to get in shape here. What am, you know? I didn't like that. You know, and it's all right. Let's talk about it. What do you want to do? What are you eating? Sit down and figure out his nutrition. Maybe get him walking 3 or 4 times a week. Better sense of self. You know, all of that. So that was the reason I started cooking, and then I just enjoyed it. I got better and better at it. And then there was a couple of firefighter cooking contests. I think the first one I went in, I won. No, the first one I went in, I won first place in a baking contest. I
Hmm.
made a low fat carrot cake that was pretty delicious. So how the whole book thing led into the book thing. If you're familiar, you might be John Sonino. He worked in Engine 58. What do they call that? The fire factory.
Yeah.
And he
I know
was
the
a
company. Yep.
yeah, and he was a good firehouse cook, not a professional chef or anything. He did a very small cookbook, paperback, called The Firefighter's Cookbook by John Sonino, 1984. So the initial copy were 5,000 copies. But how it twist of fate happened for John is Phil Donahue, we used to have a talk show. He
Oh
was
yeah.
in Chicago. He was moving to New York. So he asked his producers, he goes, listen, I'm from Chicago. I'm not from New York. How do I warm up to the New York audience? Can you guys think of a show that we could do that make us warm up to the audience? So one of the producers got the idea, goes, you know what? New Yorkers love their firefighters. All over the country, every city loves their firefighters. And we always see them in the food store. Now, this firefighter here in Harlem just wrote this little cookbook. Why don't we get him on as a guest? We'll have set up stoves and we'll do a little cooking segment with New York firefighters. So they did it. So John was on, and he was no TV star or anything. And he's an endearing personality, charming personality that he had. They used to call him Mama Sonino because he cooked for everybody. And he did the segment, and he was so nervous that while he was talking to Phil Donahue, the chicken cutlets were burning in the pan. So Phil Donahue said, hey, John, I think it's time to switch chef hat to fire hat. You got a fire going. Oh, my God, you shut off. But it became like, the word now is viral. But in that era, I don't know what the word was, but that show was monster. It was all over the place. And the book wound up being on the New York Times bestseller list for 9 weeks in a row. 9 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. And once it's on the bestseller list, people buy it because it's on the bestseller list. It starts feeding on itself. And John was like all over the place. TV. And the more TV he did, the more books he sold. He donated the money to the Burn Center. But how it happened for me is, again, no disrespect to John, and rest in peace. He passed away. Great firefighter, charming personality. He wound up having a triple bypass. Some of it, I don't know, due to the food he ate. I don't know, but he had no inkling towards cooking healthy at all. So I'm not a doctor. I can't say it led to his heart attack, but it didn't help. You know, being older, unfit. You know, and again, I don't want to talk disrespectful about because he's a wonderful human being. I met him many times. And so anyway, so I took a class at the New School in Manhattan. It was called How to Write a Cookbook and Get It Published. I really didn't take it hell-bent on the idea of publishing a book. I just said, you know what? I just got certified as a fitness trainer, nutritionist from NYU. I got that in my thing. You know, it's a summer Saturday. I'm between tours. Instead of going all the way home, I'll take this class in Manhattan. just on a whim. I took the class. Teaches goes says, everybody go around the room. I want you to say it was 75 people in the class. First time they ever had a class like this, how to write a cookbook and get it published. So he says, I'm going to go around the room. Everybody say your idea for a book. I'm like, oh my God, I don't have a book ready or an idea. I mean, I'm a firehouse cook. And then as he went around the room, because it's New York, everybody was raising their hands and went to the Culinary Institute in Hyde Park. I'm a classically trained chef in Sweden. I'm a classically trained chef from France. I'm like, wow, I am in some company here. And I said, think quick. So as they get to me, the only thing I could come up with was, listen, I've been a New York City firefighter for 13 years. There was a successful book in 1984 that was on the bestseller list, The Firefighter's Cookbook. If I was going to do a book, I would want to do a healthy version of it because I have a background in fitness and nutrition. And he said, wow, that's a fabulous idea. I'd mentioned it this afternoon. We have an editor coming in. Like, I don't even have a recipe ready. These people are sitting there with 500 recipes ready. So anyway, in the afternoon, Harriet Bell from Broadway Books, Hearst, happens to come in. She does her segment, and she made it sound like it's impossible to get a book published. You need a query letter. You need an agent. You have to have recipes ready. They have to be completely tested. And I'm like, wow, I'm not mentioning my idea. Class ends. Teacher gets up. Says, listen, thank everybody for coming. It's the first time we're in this class. It's very successful. Do not be shy if you have a good idea. What does he say? Like our fireman, for instance. Like, oh my, now he puts me on the spot. Joe, would you get up and say your idea? So I stand up in front of everybody. I say exactly the same thing. Listen, I've been a New York City firefighter for 13 years. I just got my degree in fitness and nutrition from NYU. There was a healthy firehouse cookbook. Successful. I would do a healthy version of it. Firefighter. She said, what a great idea. Talk to me after class. Everybody in the class was ready to kill me because they all came to be noticed. They were name dropping like crazy. She gave me her card. She says, call me Monday morning. I'll get you an agent. We'll walk you through this whole process. And next thing you know, I put an ad in Firehouse Magazine. They didn't want it to be a New York firefighter's cookbook like John's. They wanted it to be national flair. So I put an ad in Firehouse Magazine asking for recipes. I'll send you a copy of the book. So I got about 80 recipes from across the country. I used about 20 or 30 of my own things that I made regularly in the firehouse. Cleaned them up, whatever ones came in that weren't healthy. Tried to clean them up as best I could to make them healthy. Then I had to get the nutrition analyzed, do all of that. And next thing you know, they're sending me a contract. I'm signed for a book, and next thing you know, the book came out. And then I had no idea what comes with it. I had no idea. Regis, Good Morning America, Today Show, Entertainment Weekly, Daily News, New York Times. It was nuts for a while. I mean, it was really like, talk about getting you 15 minutes of fame. So.
And then there was a follow-up, 1998, the Firehouse Grilling Cookbook.
That did well. Of course. I asked them, book publishers are in the business to make money. And they said, listen, we put a New York firefighter on the cover. Everybody knows fireman cook. It's a no-brainer. So the book did well. Matter of fact, I was on QVC. The QVC got it. And I was selling 300 books a minute on QVC. The whole thing was crazy. Just everything about it. And like, listen, I'm a regular firefighter working in a fires. I had none of this entertainment world. I knew anything about it. And it really opened my eyes to, wow, and next thing I'm on QVC and I'm selling 300 books a minute. And the craziest thing happened. It was right when remember the Oklahoma City bombing?
Yes, April of 1995. Done a lot of shows on that between ESU and FDNY.
On QVC. And you could see like on the screen that I'm facing, the lower left-hand corner, book sales, and you see like, 100, 110, 115. Some lady calls up from Oklahoma City. She was, my son is a firefighter. He's working down at the bomb site. I have got to get this book for him so he can bring these meals. As soon as she said it, it was like the thing was like a slot machine. It was like 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. I was like, wow, I couldn't have had a better person call up to like promote it, And again, it was just a lot of luck. And I'd be the first one to admit it. And listen, I tried to share it with the firefighters I work with. Whenever we did TV things, I brought everybody into the Regis studio. You know, I put it up on the bulletin board. Listen, firefighter, I got lucky. I'm doing this thing. Anybody want to go? They'll have a car service pick us up. And so I shared it as much as I could. And yeah, there was some recipes even from 129 from firefighters I work with in the book.
And
so.
I was going to say that's the smart thing, but that comes from, by that point, it's 1995. You got 16 years experience. I think somebody with 6 years, 3 years, they wouldn't have had that acumen. Not to say that they're missing maturity and intelligence, but naturally you grow in the job, you understand the job. So a guy with 16 years isn't going to make the mistake of, and not intentionally, well, I'm going to make these appearances by myself, because like you said earlier, you don't want that jealousy to start up. You don't want that whispers to start behind your back, or that chop busting to take, to move up a notch. It's going to happen anyway, but you'd rather have it be said with love and that little twinge of resentment and animosity. So by involving everyone, hey, not only was it good for you, it was good for the camaraderie of the company.
Absolutely. I would be the first one to admit it was a little lucky break for me in the right place at the right time. I mean, you don't make millions of dollars from it. They all thought, like, I did too. I had no clue that you hardly make any money writing a book, especially a first-time author and you're not a celebrity.
Right.
You don't really make, by the time they take the fees out and the Uncle Sam's your partner too and all of that stuff, you don't really make. And they all thought, that was one of the jealousy factors. They thought I was going to be rich from it. I'm like, I've been more than happy to show you guys, what I remember saying to them, which is kind of funny about me, because they said, Joe, you've never owned a car in the same decade. You've always had a car that's at least 10 years old. I said, agreed. I said, do you think I'd be driving an 86 Dodge van if I made millions of dollars on this book? And they go, actually, I think you would. I said, okay, I'll give you that. But anyway, just a funny side note. But yeah, jealousy is going to happen, no matter what happens to you, But I tried to be as humble about it. I donated money to the Burn Center, Philadelphia Burn Center, New York Firefighters Burn Center, all of that. Yes, and then the book did well, so the publishers wanted to do another one, the Firehouse Grilling Cookbook. So we did that one. That didn't do as good as the first one. I don't know why, it just didn't. And then I was getting near the end of I don't know. And then I was, getting near the end of my career. And then we could do a whole show on 9/11 and what the book led to happen in there.
Right. We'll touch on that momentarily, but I did, and I'll move into your retirement in a moment. But what I did want to talk about before that retirement in 01 was, we talk about the time flying by. You're going up on that 20-year mark. You didn't leave at the 20, you left at 22, but you're in the position now where it's like, oh, wow, I could train other guys. It feels like yesterday I was the propy. I was the one that was getting trained. Now I can give back. And you strike me as the kind of guy, this is why I'm glad we're talking, you don't mind giving it back. As a matter of fact, you look forward to giving it back. So when you had probies coming in, or just, guys that maybe they're not necessarily probies, a couple of years on the job, but they're much younger in it and don't have the acumen experience that you do with 20, what were some of the things that you would share with them on the company and just the job itself to help ease them in?
The actual physical job part of it, taking doors, venting windows, that kind of stuff, I felt that they learned a lot of that in the academy. And I wasn't afraid to show and share that part of it too. But more of the time you're spent in the social aspect of being a firefighter in and around the firehouse. So, it's not that I felt firefighters were lacking in that area, but I said, this is a different culture than pretty much any other job. Be aware of what's going on around you, because you can get a bad reputation very quickly. And it's going to follow you through your whole career. Do I agree with it? Them calling up another firehouse and say, you're getting this guy and so I said, be really careful. Like I said, be very careful socially, what you do and what you say when you open your mouth. Don't be so quick to open your mouth. If you do know something more than somebody else, it's just basic life skills that maybe some people didn't have. Yes, I was more than happy to share my job skills with them, and they were very eager to learn that. And I was saying, when we get to a scene, stick with me, or stick with this firefighter or that firefighter, or this captain knows what he's doing. And, and then again, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And I think the intimidation factor, and that's why I used to tell them, do not be intimidated by the I like to use this word. My brother used to word it all the time. And if you're familiar with old time comic books, remember Sergeant Rock? He was a cartoon character from the comic books, and he had like 20-inch arms, chomping on a cigar, a jaw that looked like Mount Rushmore. And this was your typical South Bronx firefighter. Now, a young new firefighter is going to be really intimidated by that. So, and that firefighter, he doesn't know everything either. He might not be seeing something, and you're not going to say something to him because of the intimidation factor. But I go, use your social skills to say it in a way that's not insulting, and that's not questioning either his masculinity, his strength, his help. Don't be a helper, not a hand up, not a handout. Just be a helper in a way that socially that firefighter will understand. So that was like, because it really, the amount of time you actually spend in a burning building in fires compared to what you spend socially in and around the fires, be it drills, be it committee work, be it making a meal, all of that. There's many more hours doing that than there is actual fires. So yes, know your job, know your skills, learn, drill, learn skills, but really temper your social skills when it comes to a firehouse. You can ruin yourself almost for a whole career, which I used to hate that about it, because it was that bully mentality sometimes and it's hard to beat yourself out of that reputation. So I go, the first thing is don't get the bad reputation. Just sit, keep your mouth shut, listen and learn. So that's, if you say, that's my best advice. I could always show you how to take a door or a window or trim a window. I could always do that. Anywhere, anytime at the Rock. I could do it at a job, at a vacant building. We could show you on drill. That, to me, that's the easy part. You know what my brother Michael used to say about the fire department? You know what the hardest part to survive is? The firehouse kitchen.
Mm.
And I don't mean the food. And I don't mean the food. The mentality, all of it. That's the hardest part to survive. And you gotta have thick skin. I gave a couple of seminars. I did one for Chief Brunacini out in Phoenix, and it was so funny because it's a two-sided coin, the fire culture, if you will. There's the one side of it is the guy that's the Sergeant Rock, that's too much with the breaking chops and stuff like that. And then the other side of it is, if you do have quirky things, you can't. My perfect example story of that is, you're not going to walk into the kitchen of a firehouse. Let's say you're bald and you decide to get a toupee. You're not going to walk into a kitchen full of firemen with a toupee on and go, geez, fellas, what do you think? How does it look? You're not going to get, wow, you look so handsome in that. That's not going to happen. So on that side, the guy, just don't get a toupee, or don't do something stupid that's going to cause you to have this crazy reputation. There's enough of that going on. So
Right. The best advice that anybody could get, essentially, and this is the common theme of any fireman I talk to, is when you walk in, shut up.
exactly.
Don't say anything. Shut up.
Yep.
And that's
Yep.
until they tell you not to shut up. Then listen. Then you'll blend in just fine. And like you said earlier, the time does fly. The time does fly. So a couple. Well, actually, I want to show this picture before I get to your retirement in 2001. You mentioned your brother. We talked about your father earlier. And what's impressive about this, before we do touch on the World Trade Center as well, is the guy that drew this photo
I did.
is you. That's you.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
I didn't. I knew you could cook. I didn't know you could draw too, my friend. This is beautiful.
Oh, thank you, sir. Yeah, that's a tribute to not only 9/11, but to my father and my brother.
Yeah, it's very well done. When you sent it to
Thank
me, it blew me away. It
Yeah,
blew me
thank
away.
you. Yeah,
I
I
want
took
to
an
put it
art. I
somewhere.
took an art course. I wasn't naturally gifted. I mean, you could learn anything. I mean, and I took an art course by this woman, Lee Hammond, out in Kansas City, who does portrait drawing, and she was amazing. I went from not being able to draw a circle to drawing that in a week.
Yeah. Listen, that in a week. Wait a minute, huh?
In a week. Yeah, well, 6-8 hours a day, and it took almost
Oh,
to the end of
true.
the week to get it done. Yeah. It was
Hammering away.
hammering away. Yeah, she was amazing. You know, amazing. And to me, that was a gift. To draw something like that was a gift.
Of course. Before I get to the retirement, John Costello in the chat. YouTube's not letting me type the reply to you, my friend, but I did get your gift here. I'm looking for, in order to spruce up the wall behind me, I'm looking for some nails to hang the display up, but I did get it. That's why you don't see it up right now, John. So I'll figure that out for you, hopefully, before I take my summer break. Now, I know you retired before 9/11 in 2001, and that day is a separate story in and of itself, as you said. But 22 years in the job by that point, when, even without the success of the cookbook and all that brought to him, when did you start thinking, maybe I want to move on? I had a great run, but maybe it's time to go.
I think like any job, I mean, if you talk to an airline pilot who's 25, he'll tell you, wow, I can't believe it. After all this school, I finally landed this job with Delta and I'm flying to Paris one week and Moscow the next week. And wow, wow, wow. Talk to him when he's 45. He's going to be like, oh my God, I got to go to Moscow again. Oh, they put me up in the cheapest hotel in Paris. I've been to Paris like 50 times already. And I have friends that are pilots. They said, oh, I'm a glorified bus driver. But they don't say that when they're 25. So some of the luster and the shine goes off of it a little bit. And I wouldn't say I wasn't just as excited and just as thrilled to be a fireman. When I got on the rig, I just thought I was the luckiest guy around to have this job. And so does many other firefighters. I just had nothing to do with physical. I probably could have still went on. I thought about it, staying and maybe transferring again to another firehouse, maybe back to Manhattan. I don't know. I think part of the reason was a little bit financial. I do remember the fellow that I talked about, Tom Pellegrino. One of the things he said to me in 1979, he says, Joe, listen, you have to take the job. And I go, why? He goes, because even if you hate it, with a 20-year pension, you can retire in 1999. So I go, Tom, it's 1979. I'm never going to be 50, 45 or 50 years old. That's Star Trek to me. We'll be running around with phasers in 1999. It just seems unfathomable. And one day I was in the kitchen of 152 and working maybe with a couple of guys that was starting to get on my nerves. And I just sitting there taking it. And next thing you know, I remember looking up at the calendar and he said the spring of 90. I remember looking up at the calendar and it was the spring. I'm like, oh my God, it's the spring of 1999. I could retire if I wanted to. So I didn't really want to write that minute, but that planted the seed a little bit. And then I had heard from the older firefighters, by the time the federal tax gets taken out, Social Security and city tax, your take-home pay is sometimes the same as it is working. I go, how could that be? It just didn't seem feasible to me. So I had broken my elbow and I was down at the medical office and had some time to kill. They said, the doctor's not going to be able to see you for a little bit. So I said, where's the pension board? He's upstairs. So I go upstairs and I sat down with the guy at the computer and I said, do me a favor. He goes, oh, what's your social? He types it in. I go, what would my take-home pay be if I retired right now? He types it in. I go, that's more than I make working. And he goes, I know. Then you don't have to commute. You don't have house tax. And I go, wow. And then, after 20, you don't really get that much more in your pension. And I wasn't really looking to get promoted. I had the whole book thing happening. I wanted to go to culinary school, and I couldn't do that while I was working full time. So I came back. I remember coming back to the fires. I go, I'm going to retire. No, you're not. I go, yeah, I'm going to. And it was a really scary feeling to put the paper in and realize that it's real. That was a pretty sad day when they finally stamp all your papers and you're just, wow, I'm not a firefighter anymore.
Right. After so many years.
Yeah. And especially because I still liked it. I still was fit. I still felt I could do the job and pass a lot of information on. As a matter of fact, after 9/11, they were asking for firefighters who recently retired to come back because there was so many firefighters killed. And I really entertained the thought quite a bit. And then I said, no, you know what? This is for the next generation. And then I immediately signed up for cooking school and I went to cooking school. So that kept me busy.
And that was obviously a positive after that. And, I know you knew a lot of the guys that were killed, and
Yep.
even guys like you mentioned, or the guys that were killed on Watch Street, you knew guys across the years period that were killed or hurt seriously.
We won't go into the story now, and maybe we'll do another whole entire show about PTSD and 9/11. But I was with Captain Patty Brown and the entire crew of Ladder 3 on 9/11 on that very morning, on September 11th morning. I left by about 2 or 3 minutes, and they responded right behind me and went to the World Trade Center, and they all got killed. Everybody I had breakfast with then made breakfast for. We were doing a TV segment for Ronzoni Pasta. And we'll do a whole show on that if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to do that show. You'll come back for a part 2.
Yeah, because I was sitting there having breakfast with Captain Patty Brown and all the other firefighters there. And It's a lengthy story. I don't want to go into it right now. We'll
No, that's
save
fine.
it for
We'll
another
save
show.
we'll save it for the part two, for
Yep.
sure later this year, which we'll
Yep.
organize once we get off the air. So when exactly in 2001 did you retire? Was it May, June? When exactly in '01 did you leave?
Roughly it was probably this fall, I believe, of fall or early 2001. It was like right around the holidays. It was just, plus you got your crude leave, terminal leave. It wound up being,
Right.
into the spring of 2001 was official.
Okay, but you had left prior, like end of 2000. You had left physically.
Yeah, I had left physically. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
well,
you get
listen,
like 3 months terminal leave. There's all kinds of
right.
little
It
things going
adds
on.
up.
Yeah.
It adds up. And, like I said, it flew by. And the good thing, like you said, is that you were able to keep yourself busy. And these days, it's been more of the same because I'm going to share the screen so the audience can see it. One of the ways in this modern age where social media has really helped things is YouTube. You can push out whatever it is that you're doing, whatever content you're trying to create, for example, like this podcast or like American Firehouse Cuisine, which I'll link in the description of this episode as well for those of you that want to subscribe. It's got your social links right here, Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff. There's also an email address if you want to go and subscribe to Joe's channel. Please do so. As you can see, I am. So it's one thing to write the book. You had done that. That's arguably the hardest part, putting it all in writing. But to put it in video, and I saw this when I started doing this podcast, it's not easy either. So what prompted you to start this channel, and what amazes you most about the success you've been able to have with it? As you can see, over 3,000 subscribers.
Yeah, what I wanted to do, I was approached so many times to do a firehouse cooking show, basically when it started in '95. But nobody seemed to be able to get you need ratings to get sponsorship, and the sponsorship doesn't want to do it unless the show's got ratings. And they flew me out to Hollywood. I did a pilot. That didn't wind up panning out. I did another one. In 2012, I worked with another firefighter doing a local show in New York, and then Hurricane Sandy hit. So we did like 9 episodes, and Sandy hit, so they weren't able to air a lot of the episodes. So it seemed to never come to fruition. I wanted to do a 20-year anniversary cookbook of 9/11, so I did American Firehouse Cuisine. So I did that, and then when the show in 2012 that we tried up in New York, and because of Hurricane Sandy, the show didn't wind up airing. I had all the props, and I still thought it was a great idea. And what other chef, including Bobby Flay and Emerald, gets to slide down a pole to start the show? You know what I mean? And again, that's not a gimmick, but it makes the show unique other than other shows.
Right. It's a tribute.
And everybody loves firefighters. Everybody loves the cooking. Having your guests come down the pole is kind of cool. And then I said, I have the props. I know what it's like to work in a nostalgic New York City firehouse. I have trade skills. So I said, you know what? Let me rent a little warehouse and build a studio, put the pole up, put the setup. And like you said, because of YouTube now, you don't need a sponsor to air a show. You don't have to be on a network. You can put it out there, and then hopefully you build an audience. And certainly there's enough firefighters as an audience, which I want, but I don't want it to just be a firefighter cooking show. I want it to be a cooking show because the bigger audience is definitely culinary. But I do also want firefighters tuning in, especially young. It's definitely for somebody just asked me this the other day on a fireman I was talking. I said, for the newer firefighters to keep this tradition of firehouse cooking alive and the camaraderie around the kitchen table. So it's for the newer firefighters, but it's also for the retirees, because I hear, and myself included, so many of them pine away. Maybe they physically can't do the job anywhere, but they pine away to sit in a firehouse kitchen, laugh, have a great meal together, kid around, solve the world's problems. My friend Bill Bresnan is an artist. He did the firehouse kitchen, and he says he did a picture of what he called the firehouse kitchen. All the firefighters sitting around the table, and it says where all the world's problems are solved.
Yeah, he's right.
And that is even with a family. That's why I said I don't want it to be a firehouse cooking show. Somebody passes away, you bring food over. You want to go on a date with a beautiful woman, and you make her a really nice dinner. One of your best friends comes over, and you cook for them. I mean, yeah, you can go out to the supermarket and buy a cake for somebody. But if you make a cake for somebody, it's entirely different feeling when you hey, listen, I made this for you. They're like, what? I go, yeah, I made you cake. What? If you bought a cake at the supermarket, it's not the same feeling. And I saw that same feeling when I would cook for the firefighters, especially if it came out good. I mean, I had guys look at me with lust in their eyes. And they're like, Joe, I think I'm going to leave my wife. You know? And they would, and that's what the other thing we liked is the humor.
Right.
Like that's I made. I forget what I made. I made like breaded catfish and mango salsa, but it really came out crazy good. And I think I made a carrot cake for dessert. And I remember the way this salty old firefighter looked at me and he said, Joe, I'm telling you what, I'm thinking of leaving my wife. And he goes, you know what? I'm okay if you want to cheat on me. I'm okay with that. You know, we don't have to be intimate ever, but I just want you to cook for me, and I encourage you to cheat on me. So he goes, it'll be the perfect relationship. But that's the kind of humor, that's the kind of crazy humor you would get, you know, around
Nowhere else.
nowhere. I can honestly say that I haven't seen it anywhere else. You know,
No, and you never will.
and what you said, never will. That's what I'm hearing from the firefighters that watch it. Like, wow, I'm not that anymore, but man, I just would love to be in that kitchen with you. So that's what I'm putting out there. Any of your firefighters listening, you want to email me through the show. And if you ever happen to be down in the Florida area and you want to be a guest on the show, I mean, and that's what I really wanted to, once I establish it, that's what I wanted, because this is a universal thing. And I'm not even talking about United States of America, Poland, Russia, Czechoslovakia, Turkey. Firefighters all over the world do this, sit down and have their meal together. And the humor is the same, the language isn't, but the humor is exactly the same. I've seen it universally. So when that is removed from you, and yeah, here's a pension and medical benefits, go on your merry way. They're sitting home watching reruns and they're like, you know what, man, I'd give anything to be there again. So, and that's what I want. I want a firefighter from, let's say, and I always use this example because I like Nantucket. You know, my next guest is firefighter Smith from the Nantucket Fire Department. Boom, he comes down the pole. He's got a big thing of clams. Hey, tell me a little bit of what it's like to be a firefighter in Nantucket. And they'll say, oh my God, in the summer, the population triples and we have the best fish and the best seafood. And that's what I'm going to make for you today. I'm going to make my famous seafood clam chowder from Nantucket. And then while he's talking, he tells me a little bit about how many fire trucks are in Nantucket, what kind of responses they get. Did they ever have a big fire? Just all that fire talk. And then we switch and we go to the food talk.
It's a healing thing. It's a healing thing.
Yeah.
It gives guys the outlet. That's the thing. When a lot of guys retire, unfortunately, they're lacking that outlet and they don't know how to channel it. So they turn to unhealthy things, you know, because retirement's tough, especially when something becomes your whole identity.
Mike, I can't stress that enough. The suicide rate in the fire department is, my brother Michael took his life. The suicide rate in the fire department is astronomical. And I think one of the reasons is that because you don't have that, as much as they might complain, they love it. And it's hard for them to admit. And then when it's gone, yeah, right, you get a pension and a plane ticket and you're on your way to whatever. What, you're gonna fish every day? That's what they think. I'll just golf every day, I'll fish every day, but that's not reality. And you will miss it. So that's one of the things of doing a show like this that I want to put out there, is that, you know, to reach out. There's an organization, if you don't mind me mentioning it, ffbha.org. Mm-hmm. It's all about firefighter suicide prevention and also assisting the family. They helped me amazingly through this whole terrible journey that I had to go through, losing my brother. And I don't, you know, I can't say dying in the line of duty is one thing, but taking your own life is the hardest thing that anybody's ever has to go through. And it's preventable. You know, if you do your job great as a firefighter and you get killed in line of duty, God, it's awful. It is. But there's some small bit of honor in that. You know, no, we don't want to lose anybody. And I don't mean it that way. Please, I don't want your audience to think that. I don't mean it that way.
The audience understands, and so do I.
Right, but listen, if I had to, you know, I don't want to die 90 years old in a nursing home. If my time is up and I have to die in a fire doing my job, I think I'd be okay with that. But I'm not okay with putting a gun to my head or jumping off a bridge or taking a bunch of sleeping pills and having my friends carry that terrible grief. Listen, the grief of 9/11 was huge, still is. If I talk about it anymore, I'll still get choked up about it. But there's a level of honor in it, and there isn't and again, I don't want to disrespect anybody that's lost somebody to suicide. It's not that there's not a level of honor in suicide. There's a mystery of why and how could they and how could they do this to me and why and what didn't they think it was going to hurt? Or there's so many mysterious things about it. It is a mental breakdown, so you can't say there's dishonor. I don't want to do that. It's at a moment in time, things got so bad that they completely had a mental breakdown to take their life. And I don't mean it in that it's dishonorable, but you'll always question like why, how
Yeah.
could I have prevented it? How could I have, it's complicated grief, they call it, which it is. And I don't want to ever, I went through it. I don't ever want to see anybody ever have to experience that. So I put it out there to the audience, go to ffbha.org or any of the suicide prevention places. If you're struggling, and I mean, I hear people say, oh, reach out, talk to you. But in reality, my brother could have called me anytime he wanted. He had his phone in his hand when he did it. Why didn't he dial it? He had a mental breakdown, as most of them do. But long before that happened, can you recognize the signs of it? I don't know. I just know that if things are starting to unravel, is the right word for it, you have to kind of catch it early on and say, have you entertained this as a means of solving what's going on? And they're like, yeah, it's never going to get any better. My wife left me. I lost my house, lost my job. I'm getting foreclosed and this stuff. And it's literal the straw that broke the camel's back. And,
Mm.
if you can prevent that straw and save a life, and, they get to a place mentally that hopefully I, or nobody we know and love and care about ever gets to that place. We'll never understand it.
No, I have a unique understanding of it for this reason, and I'm an open book. I like talking about this for the same reason. I want people to know, hey, listen, you can bounce back from this, and it's also in the public safety world, the stuff you see weighs on you too. You see a lot of really tough things. But I've
Sure.
mentioned this before, and like I said, open book. And I'm glad you mentioned it. Audience knows this, but I'll say it again in case you're tuning in for the first time. I didn't have an easy childhood. I was bullied in school mercilessly, and I went through a terrible time with it. Around 2013 or so, it reached a crescendo. My mom was sick at the time as well. Thankfully, she's doing a lot better these days, but she was really sick at the time. And I had enough. And I decided one day, when my sister mother wasn't home, I was going to go and hang myself. I
Wow.
stopped. Thankfully, I did not do that. I had a breakdown and just cried my eyes out and decided, okay, we're going to pick up the pieces. Thank God I didn't do that because look, life's great now. 11 years later, I love who I am. I love where I am. Point
Yep.
being in mentioning that is this: it does get better, and you have to reach out because here's the thing. Here's what I learned from that, amongst many things. One, it's difficult to tell these things to the people you love because you feel like you're going to hurt them, but it's the opposite. The people that you love, and this is what I found, I know you understand this as well, they want you to come, even if it's difficult to listen to. They'd much rather have that difficult conversation than see you in a casket and put you down 6 feet under. So, listen, to piggyback off what Joe said, and he couldn't have said it any better. I felt that way. I came out of it. If you're feeling that way, there's no shame in reaching out. Joe's messages are open. So are mine. Reach out. We'd rather have that tough conversation than lose you. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yes. And to a certain extent, if you're still a firefighter, the bully mentality, which I've seen many times in the firehouse, could cause somebody to go over the edge. I mean, I get the humor. I get the if you come in with a toupee or you're bald or you got a big nose or whatever your quirk is. But when it gets to the relentless point, we all have a breaking point. And we might think it's the funniest thing in the world. Ah, look, 12 guys laughing at the size of that guy's nose. He's had a big nose since he was a kid. He's been dealing with it all his life. And does that mean because he said he had a big nose, he's going to take his life? But no. Next thing you know, who knows? He gets a divorce. He runs into financial problems. He screws up at a job. Now you got this stuff piling on, and you could say, "Wow, the guy took his life because I said he had a big nose." No, he took it because all the other stuff kept piling on. So, to the bullies of the firehouse or the machismo types, lay off a little bit. Know when to lay off. I don't know that they have that filter a lot of times, you know. So, and that's why I never made it a point to. I call it good-natured kidding. I love the humor. I think it's great.
Well, so do I.
Yeah, I mean, you make fun of the way somebody cooks. Listen, you could cook something better the next time. Listen, I can take it. But somebody's born with a quirk, a big nose, whatever the quirk is physically. Listen, maybe they can't change that, and you'd be amazed that, like I said, that when you said about teaching a young firefighter to learn the social skills of not being that, it may cost somebody his life. Another firefighter I work with in 129, he took his life. He got in trouble with the fire department, and he was embarrassed that to face everybody. And he saw no. What it is they run out of options of the solution being solved. Like you at that time, you said there was no solution to this. The solution was end my life. And they say it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem, but you can't. The person who's in it, involved in it at the time, can't see that there's options. And one big thing I saw is that I remember saying it distinctly to my brother, they lose their sense of humor. Like,
Wow.
firefighters are amazing to have a gallows sense of humor where they can make fun of, laugh off something. So I don't know, find your humor, find some way to, like you said, it feels like it's going to be forever. I mean, if you
It's
break
not.
up with somebody and your heart's broken, you'll never meet anybody else, whatever. Maybe not. Maybe it'll be somebody else. Maybe some other. There's always something. Wait, patience. Have patience. That's the thing I could get out of my head. Like, I remember saying to my brother in the months before he did this, I said, listen, we're all going to check out of this world sooner or later. What's the rush? Not that he said that he was going to take his life, but I go, what would be the rush? I mean, sooner or later you're going to get old, and we're all going to end up. What the rush is, because what, your house is foreclosed, or you screwed up at a job, or you having financial issues. What's the rush? And it may not. And the other side of it is to be able to take it. Sometimes it's not going to work out, and that's where having your back as a firefighter. This is the part where I say have your back. Listen. I go with a charge line into a burning building. I know these guys have my back. That's a given. But it's not a given when it comes to emotional stuff. That's where it's more important to have my back. Listen, I can take a job or fire and have a guy. I know he's got my back. That's a given in the fire service, but you have to have my back when things are really getting rough. And to them, it's like, wow, what's so rough about it? It isn't. Maybe it is. That's why I try my hardest never to say to somebody, what's the big deal? Because what's a big deal to you and a big deal to me is something else. Some guy breaks up with his girlfriend, his wife leaves him. He's devastated. I'm like, what are you devastated for? There's a million girls out there. The next buses are going to come along in a minute. Not for that moment, and not for that guy at that particular time. So you got to just say, listen, I'm here for you. I got you back on the job. That's a given. But I got you back in this. You want to go out and have a drink? You want to go apart? You want to take boxing lessons and take it out on me that way? Get it out of you somehow. Whatever we got to do to get it out of you. Let's get it out of you, because I got your back. Never mind the job. That's a given. I got your back no matter what.
Yeah. And perfectly said. You cannot hide those feelings. They're going to come out of you eventually. And I can tell you, because that's the thing that I used to think prior to me going through my own period of turmoil in life at 12, 13, which is when I would hear stories about suicide. Well, why did the person do it? Usually a famous person. Why? Didn't they know how many people loved them and cared about them? What about their family? It's so selfish, blah, blah, blah. I can tell you now from experience, having, gone through it and thankfully not done it, which is you're not thinking about that. Like you said earlier, breakdown was not the wrong word, because that's what it is. You're not thinking about that. You're in such a mental fog, much like in a fog or on the fire floor, right? You can't see the hand in front of your face because everything's so cloudy and murky and you don't know what you're stepping into. That's what it is. Up here, upstairs, you're not thinking about how much your mother loves you, pardon me, or how much, how much your dog thinks the world of you. None of that in that moment matters. So that's the key. Just before you get there, identify the signs, because to borrow a line from the old REM song, everybody hurts. Everybody hurts. We all go through our turmoil, but it's the key is how you come out of it, and it makes you stronger for it, and that much like the smoke clears when you put a line on it and you knock that fire down. Turmoil clears too. It cleared for me, and like I said before, anybody out there that's struggling, it'll clear for you too. You just got to keep pushing.
But the other thing I say is, it may not. Your love of your life may leave you and never come back. But then I say to that firefighter, this is where you have to get a little bit tough. I'm sensitive to what you're feeling. Let pour your heart out to me.
Yeah.
But this is not going to change. So let's gut it out. Let's gut it out. What do we got to do to gut it out? Do you need to cry? Do you need to, the anger comes out? Listen, let's go to a boxing gym and we'll spar a couple of rounds and get it out. And it helps get the anger out. Like, man, that felt like $1,000,000. Well, it didn't feel like that for me. I got a
Yeah.
black eye. But and he said, wow, that really worked. Or and not in every situation. So that's why I say some situations. Listen, a financial issue, you screwed up at a job. It's not the end of the world. You think it's the end of the world. Let's gut it out. You effed up. Own it. Learn from it. Own it. That's where I say the other firefighters can't turn this into a reputation killer. Say, listen, he effed up at this job. Excuse me, I know you didn't want me to use. I didn't use it.
You can say the word. It's fine. You use as long as you don't say the word, it's fine.
Okay. Yeah. You effed up. All right. Go back, relearn it. Let's go back to the scene, see what you did wrong, why that door didn't come off, why didn't, and we just won't make that mistake again. Right.
Yeah. You learn from it, you move on.
And you don't let the other firefighters turn this into a reputation killer. That's where and I was good for that, is the other firefighters. I'm like, listen, lay off. Lay off. He's had enough. He's learned his lesson. He had enough. I mean, I don't understand why you can't see it, but he's had enough. So back off.
It's important to say.
Yep.
It's important to say. I'll use a lesser example. It's going to sound silly to the audience, but I'm a diehard New York Knicks fan, as you mentioned at the top. Knicks got destroyed in Game 4 against the Pacers. Got blown out. Lost the game by 32 points. It was their worst performance thus far of the postseason. They sulk. I mean, I'm sure they felt terrible in the moment. Obviously, you don't want to lose, period, but you don't want to lose that way, get blown out by 32 points. I'm sure in the moment they felt bad, but I'm sure once they had time to process everything, they said, okay, this happened. We can't do anything about it. The result's done. Let's move on. And you know what? They moved on. 2 nights later, they came back and won the next game by 30 points. So listen, it may not get better. There may be a chapter in your life you have to close on a negative note, but the book keeps going. And I'm glad you mentioned that too, because there may not be that golden pot at the end of the rainbow in that particular chapter, but it doesn't mean the next step can't be better. We've seen guys screw up early on in the job. They go on to become captains, chiefs, commissioners even. Let's take a guy, I'm just naming him because I was doing some research on him recently. Bill Feehan, legend of the job. You don't think Bill Feehan had moments where he jacked up at a job? Did he let it dog him? No. And look what Bill Feehan accomplished in his career.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is well said. We touched on your career and we touched on mental health. And Tim K, you're right. This is very important stuff because, listen, and it's fitting because May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So it's fitting that you're coming on and talking about this. And really, every month we can say is Mental Health Awareness Month. It doesn't just have to be May. I think any month or any day that you're not feeling well, open up about it. And even if you can't talk to someone in the moment because life's busy, write it down. Or even if you're home alone, just say it out loud. Sometimes it's going to sound kooky. I've done that. If I have nobody to talk to, I just say it out loud, talk to myself real quick, and then I just put it out there and it's done. And that helps me. So there's different coping mechanisms out there for those of you in the audience, and I'm sure you guys understand that. You don't need me to tell it to you, but nevertheless, whatever those coping mechanisms are, as long as they're healthy and they're not hurting you and those you love, use them. Them. It's important because you can have the strongest body. You can look like David Hasselhoff. You can look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. If your mind is not okay, if you're not strong upstairs and healthy upstairs and feeling good upstairs, it doesn't matter. So take care of yourselves. And to borrow a humorous line before the rapid fire from Marshawn Lynch, who'll be a Hall of Famer pretty soon, as he should be one of the best running backs of all time, as he once humorously said, protect y'all's chicken and protect y'all's mental. So follow his advice. And on that note, I like it too because I love good mental health and I love good chicken. So on that note, we'll go to the rapid fire. This has been a very inspirational show, my friend. I'm not going to ask you the last question as far as advice you give a rookie firefighter because you've covered it pretty well. But I'll ask you the other 4, and that is first of the rapid fire. Funniest call you ever responded to?
I'm all ready for you. We get an EMS call, assist EMS with an overweight woman. Okay, at the ticket, we respond. We go to this apartment with Captain Brennan, I think it was. Tom Brennan. Yeah, he's pretty famous on the job. He was temporarily assigned to the 129. He goes up with me. I had the irons, so I'm with the irons in the can man. He goes up. He knocks on the door. The lady lets him in. He comes out, white as a ghost. He goes, Joe, I've been on the job 25 years and never seen anything like this. There's an overweight woman sitting in the chair. in a wheelchair with a house dress on. Her legs are spread, and there's a giant thing, I don't know what it is, sticking out from the dress between her legs, almost hanging on the floor. So I just want to get you prepared for it. And he goes, it's not her stomach. I don't know what it is. He says, I've never seen anything. He says, it looks like a giant peach pit with hair on it. So I go in with him. I'm like, oh my God. So now we have to help her. And what it was a tumor. So we're there with the ambulance drivers. So, and she was overweight on top of it. And I mean, she had her legs spread in the wheelchair, and this gigantic, I can't even describe how big it was. It was like 5 basketballs big. And so we wheel her out, take her to the thing. And so now because she was so heavy, we had to back the ambulance up to the curb so that the curbs almost met. So we backed the wheelchair up to try to figure out how to get her in because she was heavy. And there's 5 of us. A few EMS guys, me, the captain. There's 2 EMS guys, me, the captain, and the can man. So as we're backing her up, we're trying to figure out how to lift her. And she with a kind of weird, who's going to hold my tumor? Hold on a second. I get no call. I just want to she goes, who's going to hold my tumor? You never saw 3 guys play musical chairs in their life to get out of. So I jumped in the back. So I grabbed the 2 back things with my captain, 2 guys on the wheels, and the poor brand new, I guess, Proby EMS guy had to put these rubber gloves on. And as we lifted her, he holds the tumor thing, lifts her in the back of the ambulance. So it was so curious. We went back to the hospital that night where we dropped her off at Flushing Hospital. And we went back to talk to the doctors. And the doctor said, we never seen. The tumor was 70 pounds.
Oh my God.
So we of course, it was even hard to laugh at when we got back. But the thing that we thought was so funny is, listen, you get a golf ball size thing on your body somewhere, you say, geez, I got to see a doctor. Then it's the size of a softball. Like, yeah, I got to go see a doctor. Then it's the size of a basketball. You say, I got to go see a doctor. But you wait till it's 70 pounds before you decide to, yeah, and they had to cut it out. I said, what did you do? They said, yeah, we got to cut it out and biopsy and all that other stuff. So, yeah, that was pretty much the funniest. Just the way she said it. Who's going to hold my tumor? Like it was my tumor, like she owned it.
But, well, she did. I mean, technically, all 70 pounds of it. Good Lord. That's a first. That's a first for this podcast. I've heard a lot of interesting answers to that question. I think that might take the cake. Oh, my goodness. And on that note, we transition to the second of the 4 questions I'll ask you this rapid fire. Most uplifting calls, and I don't mean uplifting a tumor, most uplifting call in your career that you ever responded to.
I'll answer that the way I answered a question I did for my nephew, Nicholas, in a class. The kid asked me the best and worst day on the fire department. So he asked me the best. What was the question again? Best,
most uplifting call that you.
Okay, uplifting. So best and worst day. I'm going to have to go with 9/11. Yes, the fact that it was the most horrendous thing to happen on this planet in almost history, but I don't want to use the word camaraderie. The bringing together of people of this country, then eventually people of the world, coming together and seeing the way people were treating us with warmth and care and just all of those feelings together was the most uplifting. I have to, yes, it was horrible on so many levels, but a lot of it was uplifting. I remember going back to Ladder 5 to shower and clean up. And as the days were going by, you'd see firefighters from Hartford, then Maine, then Indiana, then Wyoming. And I'm seeing, wow, as they started coming in from all over the country. And then when I went back to Ladder 5 to see on the bulletin board, I get so choked up when I think of it because this one particular scene, it was all of these German firefighters with their helmet under their arm, in gear, on their apron in Germany someplace, saluting. And I said, wow, this has affected the entire planet. And I got German firefighters who I've never met, standing at attention, feeling the grief, but giving us honor and praise. And then as the days went by, it was Germany, Poland, Russia, Finland, Sweden. I mean, just the whole world. So uplifting. Yes, it was so horrible on so many levels. I can't stress that enough. But the uplifting feeling from the entire planet coming together like that in grief and it just was made. It got us through it somehow. But, I hope I wasn't off base by saying that, but
No, and because here's what I'm thinking, not at all. In a sense, was it the worst day for the FDNY, NYPD, Port Authority Police, EMS, and so on and so forth? Yes. But it is an uplifting job in the sense that you see the worst of humanity that day? But you also saw the best. And
yes,
that's what makes, and 25,000 people, thanks to the joint efforts of all agencies I just mentioned and many more, were able to survive that day. Were able
yes,
to escape the towers that day,
yes,
because of what those personnel on the ground did. So
yes.
that's about as uplifting as it gets, saving 25,000 people. It doesn't discount for the losses, but
Nope.
those losses were suffered by those first responders in the process of making sure that 25,000 people live to see another day. And there are people now that got to start families, that got to see their
Yes.
kids grow up, got to now see their grandchildren, all because of what the 343, the 2337, the 8 EMS personnel that we can't forget as well, and the 8 federal agents that got killed that day as well, that we also can't forget did. So, by all means, that's a great answer, and I've always thought about that. And you're the first guy to say it, but it makes total sense.
Thank you.
Third one, well, you're quite welcome. Of the rapid fire, you've talked about advice you would give others. You mentioned earlier the advice your father gave you, which, as you said, was the best you ever got. Besides your father telling you to take the FDNY test, what's the other best advice you ever got?
Okay. Oh man, there was so many instances. I'll use the best advice. I think I'm trying to think of the firefighter that said it to me. It might have been my Lieutenant Osterman in 319, because then when I just first got there. Oh no, I'm gonna use a better one. This firefighter I work with, Pat Lustering. He was amazing, amazing friend, amazing firefighter. I remember him saying to me, "Joe, while you're here, embrace this, because you're gonna blink. It doesn't feel like it now." He goes, "I'm there, ready to retire. You're gonna blink, and this is gonna be gone, and you're gonna look back someday and smell the chicken cutlet parmesan. You're gonna smell the apparatus floor with this." And the way some guy, he writes for Rescuing Providence, great articles he writes on social media. He said the smell of smoke, leather, and sweat on the apparatus floor, the food cooking, the jokes. He goes, "You're gonna blink. It doesn't feel like it, but you're gonna blink, and it's gonna be gone, and you're gonna be retired and have a nice pension and living a good life. But you're gonna miss. So while you're here, be here. While you're here, be here. Embrace it and say, I am the luckiest SOB in the world having this career. I'm not going to get rich from it, but I am so lucky, and I can get so much out of even the individual firefighters I work with. Everybody has something to give. That's what I say with the ball ball busting. I should say chop busting.
That's fine. Don't worry.
Yeah, the chop busting that's going on and stuff. Embraced, because every firefighter has something, like you said, so unique. Lawyers, doctors, dentists. I work with so many. Everybody has something that they can contribute to your life. You have something to take and also give. That's my advice. Take and give, and embrace the job while you're at it. Because I'll quote a line from Kenny Chesney's song called "Don't Blink." If anybody gets a chance, listen to it. It's a great song. And he's talking to a 100-year-old guy. And he asked the guy, like, what are you about? Give me some advice. You're 100 years old. And that's what's his advice. He goes, embrace it while it's happening. The name of the song is Don't Blink. He goes, because you're going to blink and you're going to be 100 years old like me. And you're going to look back. So while it's going on, soak it in. Like once in a while, and it happened for me a few times. I'd be on the rig in Manhattan, especially because it's so crowded. I'm on the rig. The sirens are going. We respond to a 1075. I'm strapping my mask on. I'm like, I'm getting a chill up my spine thinking about it, saying, look at these people, the way they're looking at me. I'm in the lottery winner right here. And make the sign of the cross, hope I come out of this alive. And if we do, enjoy a great meal and embrace it while it's going on. So my advice is, you're new on the job, learn your skills, learn your craft, learn from the senior firefighters, drill, enjoy it, but really embrace it while it's going on, because you're going to blink and it's going to be gone.
Hmm. Hmm. That's That's good advice. Live in the moment. It applies to all aspects of life, not just a job. I like that.
Exactly.
That's another great answer.
Yeah.
And the fourth and final, because you answered the fifth one quite well earlier. So, as I said, no need to ask it again. As far as favorite firehouse meals to cook, we've talked about that. And you've talked also about favorite meals that have been cooked for you. But on those occasions when you guys decided to order out, and go to different spots within the city, and you worked in a couple of unique neighborhoods, so there was a lot Spanish, Italian, you name it, it's there. What was the favorite meal of choice to order out, or favorite establishment in your career to go to?
We never actually went out to eat, and Flushing was primarily Oriental area, so there were a few. But you always hear Chinese food goes right through you. To tell you, I can't think of a place that we ordered. We really rarely ordered out. I mean, rarely did we order out. So I can't honestly tell you I have a special place. I mean, yeah, when I worked in 138, we went to the Corona Ice King to get ices in the summer. That was a unique place to go. But as far as a meal, no, I prefer to have it within the firehouse. And if I'm going to say this to firefighter at Proby's Fires, they're going to make something. The go-to standard for anybody: chicken cutlet parmesan. It's got cheese, it's got sauce, it's got chicken, it's got protein, and with garlic bread. So if a Proby's thinking I got to make a meal tonight, tried something unique. But if you don't want to go with the go-to meal always was chicken cutlet parmesan.
Can't go wrong with that.
Bread. Yeah,
it's classic.
Classic, right? You almost can't go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, there's death, taxes, and that chicken parmesan.
And a bonus of that is that at 3:00 in the morning, if you come back from a job and you got a tray of it left over, it tastes pretty good at 3:00 in the morning.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine. And you could eat at any time in the city that never sleeps. This has been Tim K in the chat is saying great show, and really it was, and it's not due to me, it's due to you, Joe. You were a phenomenal guest.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you so much for making the time to come on and talk. We'll talk off the air, so stick around. Before I say goodbye to the audience, and as always, you guys are just terrific in the audience. Any shout outs to anyone or anything that you would like to give, and I will link your YouTube channel in the description.
Yes, www.ffbha.org, which is Jeff Dill. He's a former captain of Palatine Fire Department, the suicide organization. Yeah, just a shout out to him. Just a shout out to the firefighters in Ladder 129. Thanks for putting up with me and my testing my recipes on you and then leaving for 152 when I finally figured it out. And the firefighters are all throughout the city, but places that I work, 319, Ladder 5 certainly, RIP to Captain Drennan and all that. Special thanks or prayers to the members of Ladder 3 who I was with the morning of 9/11, especially Captain Patty Brown, world famous, but not only that, the whole crew that was there that morning, just all of it. So, yeah, that's my special shout outs. And yes, one more. Get choked up is my father. Is the reason I became a firefighter. I truly was an arrogant teenager and never gave him the love, respect, and honor that he deserved. Working all those years in 88 engine to put up with a brat like me and my brothers and sisters. He was a noble man, an honorable man, and he certainly deserves up in heaven if he's listening. He got all my love, honor, and respect that I didn't give you. So.
Yeah, well said. And I actually do want to add to your Patty Brown shout out because yesterday was the anniversary of the iconic roof rope rescue that he was a part of. In May of 1991, Bruce Newberry, Kevin Shea, of course, both
Patty
Rescue
Barr.
1. Patty Brown was in Rescue 1 at the time as a lieutenant. This is before he made captain. And Ray McCormack, who's a friend of mine who's been on the show, longtime lieutenant, worked in the Harlem Hilton 69 engine. So shout out to all those guys for that legendary moment that was produced 33 years ago yesterday. And as always, shout out to all of you in the audience tonight who tuned in, those of you who will watch this later on as well. A shout out in advance and listen to this. And as you know, I forgot to do this last show, but for those of you listening on the audio side, I need to make sure I remember to introduce the outro songs. I didn't forget here. For those of you that will be listening to this on Spotify, Apple, Spreaker, wherever you get your podcast, the song you're about to hear is one Huey Lewis in the News, Too Hip to Be Square. So enjoy that tune, which is a classic from the 80s. And I believe the album is Sports, in which that song came out of. So can't speak today. Huey Lewis in the News, Too Hip to Be Square. In the meantime, on behalf of Joe Bonano, I'm Mike Colón, and this has been volume 60 of the Best of the Bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite. Go Knicks, go Rangers, and we will see you next time. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you Friday.